Okay, so starting section 13.3 about histograms today, we need to get our learning target down, okay? So the learning target is I can create histograms. Now, we are going to have to learn more about histograms and calculate some statistical data from histograms eventually, but today we're just going to focus on the creating and the reading of histograms. The first histogram that I want you to look at is about the scores on a math test, okay? Now, a histogram deals with categories or intervals of numbers. If you take a look at the axes, on the y-axis, we have the frequency of something occurring. Frequency, remember, means how often. So we're looking at how often a certain score on this math test occurs. Now on the x-axis, we have test scores. But if you look, they took the test scores and they grouped them into intervals. So this first interval goes from 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89, 90 to 99. Now, one of the big things that you have to remember about a histogram is that the bars have to be created equal width. So when you draw it, they should be represented with the same width. Now, the reason that they're the same width is because they also have to represent equal intervals. So it's important that we use equal intervals. And then when we draw them, that means that we will have to use an equal width when they're drawn, so that it's a good representation of the data that we're actually talking about. Okay. Now, if you look, they went from 60 to 69, so the range of that interval is 9. If you look at all four, the range of the interval is 9. Okay. Now, let's talk about how many scores fell into each category. So in this first interval of 60 to 69, you'll notice that that occurred 3 times. Here's the 2, here's the 4, it's halfway in the middle. Okay. You can't have part of a math test, so I would assume that this has to be a whole number of 3. So there are 3 tests that fell into that category, into that interval. Now this would be 9. If you look, it's between the 8 and the 10. In the interval of 80 to 89, there are 12 of those. Maybe I'll write the numbers up there. And then 90 to 99, there appears to be 7 of them. Okay. That information will be important in our next lesson when we're looking at statistics and trying to get some statistical data from this histogram. Okay. Now let's talk about mean and median. Mean and median we could calculate from this. It's just that it would be difficult to get an exact answer. Let's think about the mean for a second. The mean is where you add up all the scores and then divide it by how many scores there are. Now the issue is that we know that 3 people scored between 60 and 69. We just don't know what those exact scores are. So because we don't have exact scores, finding an exact mean is not going to be possible. So we could come up with an estimate, but we wouldn't be able to get the exact score. And the case is really the same for the median. The median, we're looking for the middle score. We might be able to come up with an idea of where that middle score lands, but we're not going to be able to get an exact middle score because we don't know exactly what the scores were. We know that 9 people scored between 70 and 79. We just don't know what each of those 9 scores is. So mean and median are only going to be estimates. And that's actually what our next lesson will be about. How do we find those estimates? Now, one thing that I can tell for sure from a histogram is how many tests were taken. I know that there were 3, 9, 12, and 7. And if I add those all together, I know that there were 31 total tests taken. So that is something that I can tell for sure from a histogram. Remember that our learning target for today is to create a histogram. So we need data in order to do that. I have a lot of data here, and we can use that to create a histogram. So here's the story. These are the ages of 100 U.S. senators at the start of the 112th Congress on January 3rd, 2011, and they want us to create a histogram. I think it's important that we actually start by creating a frequency table. We have to make some decisions about what the interval is going to be that we want to use on our histogram. And then once we know the interval, I think that we can create a frequency table, which will make making the histogram a lot easier. The first thing I want to take a look at is, are these all given to me in order? It appears that they are, which is great. They're least to greatest. If they weren't, I'd have to probably reorganize them just so it's a little bit more efficient. But what I can tell is I need to go from 39 to 86, okay? To go from 39 to 86, we should probably look at what that range is. Remember, range is the difference between the lowest number and the greatest number. So if I do 86 minus 39, I get 47 for the range. Now, I know the range is 47, so I want to have a reasonable number of bars on my histogram. I don't want to have just like 2 bars, and I don't want to have 30 either. You want to pick something that will give the people reading it good data to look at. I think that if we do the interval of 9 years like they did in that previous example, that would actually give us a pretty good amount of bars, because I'm going for a range of 47. So let's say that I'm going to do 30 to 39. Okay, the lowest one is 39. So to get that in there, I'd have to do 30 to 39. Then I would do 40 to 49. Remember, there's no overlapping. So if this one's 49, my next one would be 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89, and I should be good because my highest age is 86. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating the age interval here. And then I want to determine what the frequency of each of these categories is. So how often are they happening? If you go through and look, there's 2 in that bottom category, 30 to 39. There are 2 of them. In the 40 to 49 range, if you count them all up, there are 10 of them. From 50 to 59, looks like there's a lot of those. There are actually 30 of them. Okay, then so from 51 to 69, ooh, lots of those as well. There's actually 37 of those. From 70 to 79, if you count all those up, there are 18. And then from 80 to 89, there are 3. So that frequency table gives us a good look at how many there are in each category. Okay. Now we have to make the actual histogram. So this is our learning target for today. I can create a histogram. The first thing that you always want to do is create a title. So I'm going to write ages of U.S. senators on 1/3/11, on January 3rd, 2011. Okay. Then I need to think about my labels for my X and my Y axis. Okay, this is always going to be your frequency when you do a histogram. Okay, so how often is something happening? Now if I take a look, my lowest is 2, but my highest is 37. So I really need to go to at least 37. And I have to decide what interval to do that by. I think I'm going to go by 5s, because if I go 0 to 40, that would only be 8 lines. I think that would be pretty reasonable. So if I did 5, 10, 25, 30, 35, 40, look at that, that fit nicely. And then down here, this is going to be whatever your intervals are. So my intervals are measuring ages. Okay. Now, the first one is going to be 30 to 39. Okay, 30 to 39. And if you're doing on this on graph paper, it'll be easier to make the bars the same width. Because remember, not only do the intervals have to be the same width, but so do the bars, because that's what they're representing. So if I do my first category is 30 to 39, and there's only 2 of them. So I'm going to go maybe about that high. And don't forget, you got to label this. This is 30 to 39-year-olds. Okay. Then my next one is 10. So I'm going to go up to the 10. Now notice that I didn't leave any space there, so there's no space between the bars and there's no overlapping. And I'm going to try to draw it the same width. If I was using graph paper, making them the same width would be very easy to do. Now I'm going to label that one, that's 40 to 49. Okay. My next one is 30. So I'm going to go from here up to the 30. Try to make it, oops, I'm going to try to be a little more precise about that. And like I said, graph paper would be helpful. About the same width if I can. So that is 50 to 59. My next one is 37. So 35, 36, 37. Try to make it about the same width. So that is 60 to 69. Now we start going down a little bit. Now we're at 18. So I would say 18 is about here. That is 70 to 79. And then 80 to 89 is only 3. Now make sure you make it higher than the 2, right? And then that is 80 to 89. Okay? So that would be my histogram. The other thing that we can do when we have a histogram is we can describe the distribution. If you remember, we previously talked about a distribution looking very symmetrical or symmetric, or if it looks skewed to the left or skewed to the right. Okay? So if you take a look at this, I guess what I would say is that the data clusters around the 50, 59 and 60, 69, so that'd be these two, those are so much more than the others, and those are kind of to the right of my histogram. So I would call this skewed to the left, but only slightly. And using the word slightly gives them a little idea of the level of the skewed data. So I would say that this is skewed to the left slightly. One more histogram for us to take a look at. Let's say that we have the scores from a golf tournament. And there's not as much data here, so I think we can just write it out. 68, 78, 76, 71, 69, 73, 72, 74, 76, 70, 77, 74, 75, 76, and 71. Okay. The first thing you want to do is make a frequency table and start thinking about how large we should make our intervals. This data is not in order, so we're going to have to be careful when we take a look at it. I can tell that the smallest number is 68. I can also tell that the largest number is 78. Okay? So I'm going from 68 to 78. My range is only 10. Now in the last one, we made one interval 9 years. We're certainly not going to use 9 for our interval. If our range is only 10, we would literally have 2 intervals, which is not enough to give people a good representation of the data. So I would maybe go by an interval of 2. If you do 2s, then you're going to end up with 5 of them or 4 of them, depending on how we go about it. We could also do 3 3 would give us 4. So I think doing 2s or 3s would be a really good choice. What I'm going to do for this one, for the frequency table for the Gulf scores, is I'm going to choose to do 68 to 70. So that's actually an interval of 3, right? 68, 69, 70. It's a difference of 2, but there's 3 numbers in there. Now I just have to make sure I make all the other ones the same. So then if I do 71, I'll have to do 73. 71, 72, 73. 74 to 76. 77 to 79, and that's high enough because I only really needed to go to 78. Now, the frequency that these occur. So it might be easy to do a kind of tally marks and then to add them up. So 68 would fall here, 78, 76, 71, 69, 73, 72, 74, 76, 70, 77, 74, 75, 76, and 71. So this is a frequency of 3, 4, 6, 2. Now we still have to make the histogram, right? This is just information to help organize us so that we can make our histogram efficiently. So let's make our X and Y axis, and we do have to give it a title. So I'm going to write Gulf Tournament Scores. We have to label our Y axis, which is always going to be our frequency. And then down here, I am talking about scores. Our first interval is 68 to 70, and there were 3 of those. So I have to decide what I'm going to make my intervals on the y-axis. My biggest number is 6, so I think going by ones is more than reasonable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So for 68 to 70, there were 3 of those. Remember, I'm going to try to make my intervals the same width. The next one, there are 4 of those. I might have made that a little too wide, so using graph paper would be a great idea. That's 71 to 73. Then I need a 6. And that would be 74 to 76. And then my last one is 2. And that is 77 to 79. And my histogram is finished.